thank you very much for joining us here today. I think we've got a fair number of participants assigned there have showed up now, so we'll get started here. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Sheeva.AI's webinar, Post-COVID Normal for the Connected Car. Again, thanks for coming. My name is Trevor Curwin, Industry Analyst and VP of Energy and Cloud Markets for Greensparc, an enterprise-scale energy load balancing platform for large power customers. Thanks again for taking the time to join us today in what we hope is going to be an engaging and lively discussion in the new reality of in-vehicle commerce in a post-pandemic world. A little bit about our agenda today. We'll kick off with some introductory discussion, and with me setting the table as a background to today's overall presentation. I'll talk about the current state of affairs in vehicle-based transactions, today's customer experience, and the future of engagement. After that, I'll be joined on our virtual stage by Evgeny Klochikhin and Gani Nayak for a fireside chat on defining vehicle location-based services, a term you're going to hear from us here today, or VLBS, and we're going to be looking into that market landscape. Gani is the CTO and EVP of Engineering for Chamberlain Group. They're a market leader in residential and commercial access control solutions, including garage door openers, parking structures, and warehouses. Ev is the founder and CEO of Sheeva, the first cross-platform location-based service solution for cars. They provide everything you need to enable VLBS, and in any car in one place, no physical infrastructure required. Later on, we'll open up the discussion for a bigger roundtable with Gani and Ev, and being joined by David Pickeral, Sheeva's co-founder and head of strategy, and Rei Kato of Hagiwara America, a global supplier for the automotive industry, providing innovative solutions from digital devices to software to create a connected society. After our roundtable, this is the part that we want to make sure you're involved in, we'll open up the floor to a Q&A with you, the audience. By all means, a few notes as we get started here about how you can interact with us, and we really want you to do that. This is really meant to be as lively discussion as we can muster here today. You can ask a question at any time in our presentations. You don't have to wait for the Q&A section if you want to queue up a question first by clicking on the Q&A button and typing in your question. The team running the webinar today will collect the questions for the Q&A period. That's when we'll actually address the questions, and we'll get through them, as many of them as we can, before the session ends. And again, we really do want this to be an interactive and lively discussion, so hit us with whatever you need to, whatever you got on your mind. For the benefit of everyone attending and to avoid any unnecessary noise interruption, the audience will be muted during the webinar, so you don't have to worry about settings on your side. So please do use that Q&A feature if you do want to pose a question, or the chat feature for broader comment. As well, a link to the recorded version of this webinar will be available online afterwards. We'll provide this if you feel the need to share it with any of your colleagues as needed, or if you want to go back and reference something that was asked or discussed. So let's get started. Let's begin with an overview of what's key in the vehicle-driven transactions world as we see it now that we hopefully could see the light at the end of the pandemic tunnel. While we hope to return to normal soon, there's lots of talk of vaccines and deadlines, which is great news. We know that there will be a new normal in a lot of areas of commerce that will not look like the old world. Working from home will change the way we might want to live and move around and go to work and so on. And that means it could change the infrastructure of where we live right now too. Cities might look and build and plan differently. New health and safety-driven behaviors are likely to alter how we interact with each other and with our environments, probably permanently. So let's talk first about the rise in contactless payments and kind of where we are in that world right now as we set the table here. 1 month into the COVID-19 pandemic in April 2020, roughly 1 month, a survey by MasterCard said that 82% of consumers globally wanted a contactless payment option for safety purposes. In the last year, retailers from Walmart to Costco to Target have showed massive increases in human actions taken about contactless payments, curbside pickups. Often these services were something available to premium customers before, like at a Costco, but remain little used, except in very specific circumstances. Now fears of entering a store full of people were driving their development in the past year. Target, this order pickup grew 278% from Q3 2020 and 212 in Q4. Drive up transactions at their store grew 500%, probably on a small base, but still you're seeing a fundamental change in human behavior. Walmart curbside pickup became 13% of transactions in North America, almost overnight. And since then, the company has announced that they're planning to invest literally billions into this offering, seeing it growing about 30 to 40% of transactions as customers. This becomes the new way to interact in retail, post-COVID or not. While the retailer knows there's increased labor costs and infrastructure development with this, they see a permanent change. This is the point of doing it. During the pandemic, Costco sped up rollout of contactless payment options at their 600 plus North American gas stations, allowing app-based payments like Apple Pay and tap-to-pay technology that's already embedded in some credit cards. Overall, Juniper research showed, pre-pandemic, contactless payments rising from 2 trillion in 2020 to 6 trillion in 2024. This is before the pandemic. Now their 2020 research shows that 36% of consumers, just 2 months into the pandemic in early 2020, saw contactless payments as basically as table stakes for any retailer versus 28% the year before. Which brings us to another critical issue: reduced human interaction. The fears induced by transmission early on in the COVID-19 pandemic made consumers leery. And even though the US Center for Disease Control was saying in May that, despite 1 month after MasterCard's survey that we mentioned, 82% of people wanted contactless payment, and 2 months after the pandemic was declared, the risk of contamination on surfaces was actually a poor vector for infections. This is what the CDC was saying. Consumers still remain leery. If there's a way to describe it, think better safe than sorry. Think of how we considered handshakes 2 years ago, a year ago, and then a year from now. Do we really need to shake hands? Do you need in your retail experience to touch something dozens of times a day that someone else has touched dozens of times a day? On the retailer side of this equation, on the commerce side of it, there's an inevitable cost. You need to be disinfecting constantly, or you need to be seen to be doing so. There's third-party firms that have set up certifications allowing you now to put a new sticker on your front door that says what your commitment is to cleaning. All of this has a cost. So if you're considering integrating new contactless technologies, you're faced with a range of options. ExxonMobil, for example, announced that they're using Amazon's Alexa as an interface. Driving app Waze is adding new transactional functionality to its offerings. There's a whole host of ways for you to try and change that. So business line managers and CTOs are left to calculate the uptake of these new contactless offerings, given the installed base of the existing tech. Payment systems exist already, so how will Waze work against Venmo or a dozen different banking apps? QR codes are cropping up everywhere during the pandemic, like scanning menus at a restaurant to avoid circulating paper versions. QR code technology is popular and the behavior to use them is popular in Asia, but how much of my North American client base would understand them? NFC technology, same thing. Close to point of sale, enabling transactions close to point of sale exists, but tweaking them to make transactions precise when your consumer is surrounded by point of sale devices, like at a gas station, for example, that could be a challenge. And this involves paying to upgrade the technology. End customers have a phone full of apps, meaning they have a phone full of choices, which leads us to the next issue: increased engagement. When we talk to end consumers of this ecosystem, two big challenges crop up they want solved. Save my customers time and give me better insight into their behavior to build a more engaged relationship. Those are big winners. One respondent to an informal survey we've been conducting, was in the retail energy sector, referred to these transactions as grudge purchases. That's his words. None of his customers really want to buy gasoline, and his margins are dependent on additional transactions during the visit, buying food, buying a chocolate bar, car washes, so on. So he wants to make the gas buying experience as seamless and easy as possible for them. If you save them time, you save them grief, it's a winner. Just a press release scan of the last 6 months show our respondent and his competitors, the top folks in that space, are going to launch some kind of payment in the next 12 to 24 months. And then finally, there's an issue around years-old decisions about joining affinity programs and picking payments processors have often meant that sparse data they have sparse data on even their super users. Data resides with a third party. Insights can be costly, depending on the technological skill set of that third party, not very targeted. It's all part of a bigger digital transformation story. So how can I use this moment of technological infrastructure investment to improve client outcomes and build better engagement? The reality is much of the tech to deal with this post-COVID normal isn't really new, but is being better organized and coordinated for use in the vehicle. So with this new normal in mind, let's move to our fireside chat, defining the VLBS landscape. Wait here for a moment. So while location-based services may not be a new thing per se, and my fellow speakers here will get into that, the concept of the car being a new mode for these services is something many sectors, from automotive manufacturers to telecommunications providers to retailers, are adjusting their strategies around to build traction with their end consumers now. I'd like to welcome to the stage Gani Nayak, CTO and EVP of Engineering for Chamberlain Group, and Evgeny Klochikhin, founder and CEO of Sheeva. Gani, we'll start with you. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're joining us here today.
Thank you, Trevor. It's nice to be here. My name is Gani Nayak. I'm the CTO and Head of Engineering at Chamberlain Group. And in my role, I'm responsible for all product development, engineering, and all of our cloud operations for our IoT cloud. And prior to working at Chamberlain, I spent about 5 years at Harman International in their automotive infotainment division, leading the North American business and the product development for the North American OEMs. So it's an exciting time to be in this space, and I'm really happy to be here to chat with you and Evgeny and the team.
Excellent, thanks, Gani. And Ev, please tell us a little bit more about your firm and why you're here today.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Really great to be here and sitting alongside Gani Nayak, the leader in some of the automotive applications out there. So my name is Evgeny. I'm the CEO and founder of Sheeva.AI. We have been working on this for 5 years at this point, and we have been really looking into this location-based services piece for cars as it has been evolving in the marketplace. I myself come from the more research and academic background, led a few multi-million projects for the US government before, and worked with the top level of national agencies, especially around evidence-based policy, utilizing some of the big data to better understand how the societies evolve and how innovation happens. And it's exactly the knowledge that we're now bringing out today to the world and to help citizens and consumers really drive around and get the most seamless experience possible with a location-based services for cars platform, or VLBS, which Sheeva.AI is. Today, I also serve on the ITS Technical Committee 204, which is working with global partners, really, to develop various standards for integrated mobility solutions and really understanding how transportation changes in the world today.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ev, for that. And thanks, guys, for joining us. So let's kick off this fireside chat with a question here. I just mentioned a few moments ago how COVID-19 may have permanently altered consumer behavior. Is this motivation, from what you guys are seeing, is this motivation more one of previously sort of unrealized convenience, kind of like what we're saying with Target, or that's been pulled forward in its timeline of development in retail tech, or is it one more of safety concerns by the consumer? Is it fear or ease of use, I guess is the way to say it. So Ev, maybe you can kick that off.
Yes, of course, Trevor. Like you said, VLBS has been there for years. There is nothing new in terms of location-based services for cars. What is new because of COVID is it's super hard to replace user routines. It's super hard to train and educate people to change whatever they do every day, every moment they're driving or they're kind of going out of their home and doing certain things with get an example, right? Toll tags. How many of us do have a toll tag? Not many people. About 10% of cars probably have those, although it's very convenient to drive through really quickly. And that technology has been there for 20 years. So essentially what COVID-19 opened for us is really more of people open to change their user routines. And that is where technology can flood in and actually use that opportunity now to utilize that people are guided towards contactless payments. They are really open to automating their experience. They are open to reduced human interaction. And that is exactly what I think has changed and what opens up a new opportunity for VLBS to move forward.
Fantastic. Gani, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. Yes, Evgeny makes a good point. I have a slightly different opinion. I mean, if you roll back in time and 2 years ago, and did a survey, we would talk about it. Working from home remotely was pretty much a non-starter if you had asked me or my boss. And yet here we are, 15 months into the pandemic or something of that order, and we have been working from home successfully. So this whole pandemic kind of forced us into the situation, and we have learned to adapt and to do it really well. And so have many companies around the world, right? So if recently the surveys done show that almost 80 to 85% of employees do not want to come back to the office. They want to continue to work from home. Same thing, as you mentioned earlier, curbside delivery and pickup of whether it's groceries, whether it's your dinner, or anything else that you buy, has risen 150 to 200% quarter over quarter. So I think as this pandemic has forced people into trying new things, you have also seen that adoption of these new types of services, which reduce human interaction and do contactless payments, they have increased tremendously. So I would say that some of these things are here to stay, regardless of the fear of transmission of virus going forward. And I think the time that we have spent in the pandemic era has kind of shaped or changed some of the key behaviors of consumers around the globe. So I think there's a ripe and a big opportunity for services that move in this direction.
Great, fantastic. And we've already seen, when you're talking about that, about changing behavior, we've already seen business models like insurance change from like a retainer model, more or less, to an on-demand model. We may see that for the entire vehicle relationship, moving from car ownership to household mobility management. I think Ford calls himself a mobility company now too, even. So are automotive OEMs ready for that? Gani, maybe you want to start us there.
Yeah, I think in general, automotive OEMs are behind the times in a lot of these types of new services, right? So take simple example of navigation, right? How many of you guys really use the navigation system that your automotive company offers you? And how many of you rely on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, right? So that's a very simple but very powerful example that shows that automotive OEMs are behind times in terms of adoption of, whether it's adoption of technology, whether it's adoption of new business models, right? So I think that there's a lot of work to be done here. So if you take a step back, right? I mean, LBS-based services there have been certain categories of LBS services that have been quite popular. Fleet management of vehicles has been quite popular and has been around for many years. Emergency services, GM OnStar is a very successful example of a subscription-based service where people are paying every month or every 6 months or whatever it is, and to sign up for this type of service, right? So there are certain categories of services that have been quite popular. eCall is making the similar service almost mandatory in Europe, and that's taking off. But if you really look at the connected services space, right, connected vehicles, I think it's like 40 to 50 million vehicles around the globe today have connectivity capability, but it's supposed to grow to 500 million vehicles in the next 5 to 6 years. So I think the opportunity is tremendous, but there are certain things that OEMs need to learn to improve. So I'll give you a couple examples, right? So most people are used to consuming these types of services on their smartphones today, right? So, but there is a one-to-one relationship between a smartphone and its owner. Once you get into a car, the car is slightly a different beast. You have to have a one-to-many relationship. Whether it's to your driver, to the passengers, and if it's a shared type of a scenario, then whoever enters the car, right, in a rental type scenario. So I think the types of services that automotive OEMs build should be less car centric and should be more user centric. And I think to the extent that they're able to do that successfully. And I worked on a project with GM when I was at Harman, where they actually did that, where you could actually create a profile in the cloud for yourself, and regardless of which GM vehicle you owned and you got in, you could, using your key fob or using your password, automatically log into your profile and download all the attributes of your profile, such as your favorite stations, for example, on your FM and satellite radio, and so on and so forth, right? But that's, again, limited to the GM cars that have this feature. So in order to really extrapolate it and use it across different types of OEMs, I think there has to be a change in the way OEMs think about bringing new services to market. And I think that's an area where OEMs have generally been behind. They're working on it, but generally, I would say that they are behind the rest of the industry.
Great points. Evgeny, anything you've seen that too?
Yeah, but first of all, I fully agree with what Gan just said. It's obvious that we have a huge opportunity out there. It's a little bit of a paradigmatic shift that needs to happen within some of the OEM mindset out there as how they view the driver and the passengers as users, which would be very similar to how kind of smartphone companies view people, right? It's just a different type of reality that is created around them. To be fair, though, OEMs have been working on this for at least a decade now. I mean, they tried car sharing models, they tried car subscription models. They are learning. They're trying to get over this, and this is commendable, how much effort they actually put into this and how many people are thinking about this and trying to really overcome some of those difficulties. Where I do believe there is some issue there, which I call direct-to-consumer conundrum. So essentially, automotive industry is not a B2C industry. All the vehicles are being sold over dealerships. So the issue is that the OEM does not really have a historic relationship with the user, with the driver, because the car owner does not really touch the actual OEM, the actual producer of that vehicle. They talk to the dealer, and the dealers need to be certified. The dealers need to be trained by that OEM. So that is where I see this kind of somewhat challenge that needs to be overcome. And that is where I see the opportunity as well for companies like us to be a middleware. That is where we come in and we connect the dots. So that is what is happening. By now, you had dealerships connecting the dots, but dealerships are static. Now, how can you produce that value that is dynamic, that is always with that driver? That is where this middleware piece is super critical to be in place so that everything just starts working as an ecosystem. And that's where I believe we're taking our company to support that process.
So great, and that's a key issue here. And one more thing we need to think about with this. I mean, how does the data infrastructure, or what does the data infrastructure need to look like for VLBS to be everywhere? What are the bottlenecks or pinch points in the stack right now that we don't see yet? What about the business or the tech infrastructure behind the scenes? Whatever. What do you see? Who do you see getting the earliest and best benefit? Evgeny, maybe we'll start with you on this one.
Of course. I mean, we have been working on this for a few years now, as I said, right? So we're seeing a lot of movement, especially in the automotive industry, thinking about the cloud, OEM clouds. Every OEM today has the cloud architecture. And much thanks to Gani and his work at Harman, I mentioned connecting all those cars into there. The other thing that has been happening also is kind of really thinking through how the services can be delivered. So the term location-based services is very prolific in the automotive industry. If you just go on LinkedIn and start looking by that terminology, and you will see a lot of OEM engineers having this title, as you know, head of location-based services at Mercedes-Benz or location-based services at BMW. So there is definitely a lot of people actually looking into this. What is interesting is how the industry itself tries to adapt and to understand what technologically, paradigmatically, it needs to look like, right? That is where I think this kind of gap a little bit exists out there, because many people would come in and they say, all right, for payments, we need blockchain, we need tokenization, we need this authentication all inside the car, a lot of cameras, a lot of hardware, and then it appears to be a multi-$1,000 cost for the car maker to even enable these. So why don't we do it in the cloud? Right? Why don't we just push everything in the cloud and use the connectivity and built-in connectivity? Why don't we sparingly pair with web and mobile, right? So these are the types of questions that I believe the automotive industry is going through right now. And we're probably 6 to 12 months in front of actually what is going to happen in terms of defining how these architectures are going to work within the OEM industry. And that is what VLBS infrastructure was going to look like as the industry coming forward. We're offering this to be super lightweight, super easy to integrate, everything in the cloud, low cost. So that is where our vision is. And that is what we're trying to really pursue everyone and to convince everyone that this is the easiest. Why do you want to invest billions of dollars in something that can be done with a few million, right? So if that is something, if that argument does allow OEMs to understand what the value is, that is what I believe is really the future of VLBS with fully digital infrastructure, no physical assets there.
Great. And Gani, I mean, from your perspective, I mean, I know I've talked about carbon experience, but what do you think?
So I think Evgeny is on point when he talks about the ease of integration of technology into the vehicle. I think the big challenge has been that whenever new services have to be launched, to make the business model work, the cost of adding this type of a feature in the vehicle cannot be too much, right? Because there is a huge amount of pressure on making sure that the cost of goods sold is kept within a certain range. So I think that companies such as Sheeva, who have technologies that enable new services without increasing the cost a lot and relying on the cloud, I think that's a winner, right? So to me, I think Sheeva is on the right path from that perspective. So that's on the technology side. The second one is around service agreements, and I mean OEMs generally are. They struggle to strike, set up services with other partners, whether it's a fuel company, parking company, other cloud application providers. Having been at Harman, I saw how much they struggled to adopt Google's Android operating system platform, for example, right? Because there were a lot of naysayers within OEMs to doing that, and they wanted to stick with the legacy platforms. Operating system platforms that existed. So I think to the extent that companies such as Sheeva bring not just technology, but also the ecosystem of partners to the equation and make it very easy to say, hey, sign here, and with these type of the agreements, when you sign with me, you get these agreements in place already. So your time to market to launch the service goes from 2 to 3 years, which generally what it takes OEMs to do, to 3 to 6 months. If you can do that, I think you have a winner, right? So I think that's the second area. Then the third area is around user experience. I think you mentioned about increasing engagement and user experience. See, a lot of these new types of services, right? We see that. I mean, I'm in the B2C space right now, where we launch new applications and new features on mobile apps. And the way you engage customers, right? Customer engagement, marketing to customers, it's a very iterative process. So you got to be able to do A/B testing. You got to be able to bring new things in front of their eyeballs, see what works, what doesn't work, and I call it iterate and evolve or die, right? So I think doing that, what you are able to do on the smartphone side, bringing that agile capability into the vehicle is also important, right? So I think so first is technology, second is around service partnerships, and third one is around user engagement, right? So all these three, if you ask me, all these three areas need to be evolution needs to happen. And I think companies such as Sheeva.AI, who bring the technology, who bring the service partners, and also are able to advise OEMs on how to engage users, I think that is the winning combination, in my opinion.
Fantastic points, and yeah, that engagement piece is critical. Great, guys, this is a great kickoff for the fireside chat. And audience, just as a reminder, please don't forget, you can ask a question at any time using the Q&A function. We will get to them during the Q&A session after the next discussion. So let's move on to our industry roundtable and make some room up here on our virtual stage for Rei Kato of Hagiwara America, as well as David Pickeral, Sheeva's co-founder and head of strategy. Before we begin, as the new guys on the stage, please tell us a little bit about yourselves and why you're here today. Kato-san, maybe we'll start with you.
Thank you, Trevor. This is Rei Kato from Hagiwara America. Hagiwara America is doing the vehicle mainly for the automobile, working with OEM or tier one globally, and try to enable the connectivity, such as including Sheeva technology for the OEM or automobile industry. So that's our goal. Thank you.
Fantastic. And David, a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously Evgeny's already introduced Sheeva, AI and what we do. Again, I'm the one of the two co-founders that you mentioned and the head of strategy. I've been doing this smart transportation thing across intelligent transportation, connected vehicles, transit, and I started my career way back as a Navy logistics officer. So I've been in this for about 33 years now, and it's always interesting, and it changes every year. There's something new. Every day there's something new almost.
Yeah, especially as an ex-military logistics guy, we've seen a lot of things at this last. That's my background too, David. So yes, I know we've seen a lot of things thrown up in the air. Well, fantastic. Thanks you guys for joining us in the discussion. So let's start with something key. I'm sure to everybody who's listening in, how all of this generates revenue. With this new VLBS landscape, what new revenue streams are possible that really haven't been considered deeply yet? What are the new business models emerging, and how do businesses like yours prepare for them? And we'll start with Rei from Hagiwara on this, and then to David. So Rei, if you want to sort of tackle this to start.
Yes. So yeah, we have like talking to like OEMs or the tier ones a lot about like a similar technology. More like cloud-based service, as like Gani mentioned. OEM tend to like develop like a much more like complicated service or like a technology in the vehicle itself. But I'm not really sure 100% like the user perspective, like they are willing to use those complicated system in a car. Usually, like, especially like while you're driving, you don't want to do like a command or like typing at all. So that's like a kind of like a message from the OEM, and even like they're developing a huge system. One thing is like user, I'm not 100% sure user willing to use that or not. Second thing is like compare with like those really complicated system. Again, like this like Sheeva.AI. This like technology API enabled to the connected to the API. This can like really like accelerate to the Sheeva.AI is really like a easy to plug in, and also a small like a footprint of like a software, which is really easy to implement to the car, even like a tier 1 or OEM. And so this, I believe this can like really enable that VLBS like services to the end user much quicker than other complicated system which is OEM is developing. So that's really great like a news, and that's why like we are working with like a Sheeva.AI really closely to promote like this kind of service to the OEM or tier 1.
Great. David, anything you wanted to add to that as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think Kato-san did a really good job in terms of laying kind of the foundation for what we need to do. I mean, I think fundamentally that what needs to be done is we need to prepare for a future where an automotive, the industry has to prepare for. They've been building more and more complicated systems into cars for decades. Really, they need to kind of follow the model of the internet and of mobile devices, and almost think of a car as an ICT device, which it is. And a lot of the functionality is going to be pulled off the vehicle and done in the cloud, just like your computer storage, your software as a service runs in the cloud. So it's really a migration into kind of this seamless, standardized ICT environment when you're talking about vehicle functions or connected functions. So it's not an easy task, but it's really kind of pulling the vehicle and the car into the internet to do nothing else but cars. Now it's time for the vehicles to join the rest of the connected world, and that's really what we're very much about at Sheeva, is creating that connectivity bridge. And once you do that, autonomy and electric and self-driving cars and sharing and all that stuff can be happen, but you got to build that pipeline first, and that's what the change that's going to take place to allow the rest to happen.
Great. And David, thank you very much there. maybe we take on a different, sorry, and Ev and Gani, if you had anything to add there.
Yes, I just wanted to add one more thing to Kato-san's comment about, driver distraction is a very challenging issue for car OEMs when they talk about these types of services. And you can see these days that, there are voice enablement where somebody says, hey, I need to put gas, take me to the nearest gas station. You might have seen examples of that, right? I think of this, what Sheeva is working on as the next evolution of that, where your car is your wallet, right? So you don't have to have a discussion with your car to tell it that it needs gas. You just drive up to the gas station as you would normally do, and as soon as you park the car there in front of the front of the terminal, and you get up, you put your gas, and you drive away, right? And all the transaction happens seamlessly underneath the hood, with you not having to have any kind of discussion. To me, that is the power of this technology that Evgeny and team are working on, and I think that's what's most exciting about it.
Fantastic. So, headlines right now are filled, post pandemic. It's not just the issue about the illness itself, but about budgets and so on. Municipal transportation agencies, whether they're transit and parking, whatever, like San Francisco's here is, but whatever they are, they're faced with the tough economic times right now. The big loss of revenue over everybody working from home, et cetera, in the last year. How are these public institutions' revenue collection models evolving against the challenges of needing to, revert to mean of previous revenues, all while also having to manage an upgrade to, frankly, some pretty aging tech infrastructure, and as well, issues, and there's an even bigger issue out there lurking for us, growing and desperate need to replace the flat tax, the flat gas tax model that we had for a long time that funded the highway system, one that takes into account electric vehicle use and just fewer gallons of gas bought with hybrids and better efficiency, even, as, combustion engines kind of fade off into the sunset. And along with better apportioning fees for the type and time, time, route, and amount of driven miles. This means new ideas are kind of needed. How can VLBS support this? And David, I think you're out there still. Yes.
Yeah,
sorry. Very good. Maybe we start with you on this.
I mean, you just kind of said, Trevor, the gas taxes, it hadn't been raised in the United States since 1994. And as the new Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, said a couple of weeks ago, he met with the American Association of Highway and Transportation Officials. Really, we wanted to get electric vehicles going, but it's not equitable to charge by paying at the pump. You've really got to have new methods of collecting revenue. Tolling is very, very expensive infrastructure. I've worked on congestion charging and tolling projects around the world for 20 years. And it was a good jump in the 1990s when we started electronic tolling, but you can't wire the entire, do what London did and put congestion charged big gantries on every street. London did it, Stockholm did it, Singapore did it, but you need to have something that's virtual and can be done anywhere and can be reconfigured. And there's no reason not to do this with the connected car. We're going to have a connected world. There's no reason to set up all these different charge points when you can do it in the vehicle and follow the natural evolution of connected vehicle.
Right. I mean, the decisions are going to be bespoke in the various cities in a lot of cases. I mean, it depends on a lot of things. Anybody else out there with a point of view on that as well?
Sure, Trevor. Well, let me just chime in really quick here. I'm super excited with the proposed infrastructure spending bill so far, right? Which was President Biden and the administration put forward there. It's really all about fuel tax is gone. We are all moving into road usage charging. What does this mean? Here I would like to bring up, which I usually like to use as an example, when when we started working on parking in New York, there are over 3 million parking spaces in New York. Maybe 1 or 3% of them are metered spaces. So can you put sensors in every one of those spots to make sure that you can provide real-time parking space availability? That's prohibitive cost. It's impossible. The same thing about road usage charging. Like, what type of infrastructure can you put on the road so that every vehicle is accurately located and tracked to know how many roads they use and how much mileage they generated? So that's impossible. Therefore, the only way for this to go is inside the car, is a field application. Now, of course, there are compliance issues. There are certain issues on the technology side, but it's happening regardless. Sheeva or no Sheeva, VLBS is here to stay. It is impossible to perceive the world with all of this happening that it's not going to be the mandatory thing, the core technology in the connected vehicle by 2025 in every car. And those cars who are not connected cars, they have to be retrofitted. So that is obvious. There's just no way other than this, and that is what really I'm super excited about, this future that is taking shape now, and that's what I think everyone just needs to realize, that this is happening.
And to your point, Evgeny, the retrofit's not that hard. We have a simple device that does that. So if you have a classic Corvette or something, you can stick it in there, but it's all going to be moving towards that connected vehicle, just like just like every other evolution that's happened in 130 some years of automotive evolution. It's never been a static industry, never ever been a static industry any more than the tech industry has. And it is the tech industry. It just happens to have wheels on it for now. So they have they have the sand cruisers like Star Wars, and they won't have wheels.
Yes. Gani, did you have anything on that too, or? Gani?
Sorry. No, I don't have an opinion on that. I agree with what Evgeny just said. I'm not up to date on the latest US the transportation discussion that they're talking about in the bill.
I know the president's in Pittsburgh today. I don't know if we're preempting him with this webinar, but
Yeah.
I know that I'm expecting a big announcement.
I was
Trevor.
I was just wondering how Evgeny got access to all these president's announcements before the announcement.
Yes. So yeah, we've got a special backdoor. So let's maybe something here that's a little bit more. I mean, so now we talked about how this makes how we're going to find new ways of making money on this. So then, who will own the now brand new that we've just discussed here, the brand new VLBS P&L? Who's best poised to own it? And Gani, I think this one is lobbed at you first.
So we were joking about this earlier, and I saw a question in our channel which talked about LBS market growing from 150 billion in 21 through 25, right? Somebody's Colin on the line has asked that question. So yes. We were joking about this earlier, and I was saying that I'm only interested in owning it if it's $1 billion plus P&L, right? So I think as Evgeny said, so if you wind the clock back a few years, right? 5 years ago or 10 years, there wasn't a connected services P&L in OEMs. Okay, but now you see it everywhere, right? So I think LBS type services are kind of like, in some cases within connected services, in some cases maybe outside. But I think as the market grows and the opportunity and the types of services grow, I think there will be a VLBS P&L owner within an OEM, whether either they are part of their connected services strategy or their overall software and solutions strategy. Because to an earlier point Evgeny made, the OEMs definitely want to build a brand recognition and a direct to consumer connection. So that they can learn their users' behaviors, collect data, and offer new, better services to them. And I think that's going to drive them to create marketing teams, product management teams, and P&L owners associated with these types of services. So I think the best, the best place for that will be in the OEM channel, in the OEM organization.
So you're definitely in the VIP section of the casino for it's $1 billion blind just to get to the table. Okay, great. Anybody else anybody else have an opinion on that, where that might reside relative to where you are?
Well, let me just take a stab at this, Trevor. Actually, we are seeing a lot of this discussion as to who is going to own this within the OEMs. The issue is that it's purely administrative, to be honest, because there is no SKU. There is no line item within the accounting department of the OEM. It's even if someone comes in and says, all right, we're going to generate those transactions, we're going to send you the money, they cannot even accept the money by itself. So, and that is just a corporate world, right? That's just the difficulty of a big organization. It's like a government. OEM is like a government. So it's really difficult to manage all those kind of nitty gritty of the deals and of the money flowing. So therefore, we need to be creative. Whoever owns this P&L, the creativity needs about how do we accept that money? What does this money looks like? For example, when we go to the OEM, we're here to say, all right, let's just do a rebate. We don't necessarily have to process transactions and give you back the money every transaction happening. It's too hard to reconcile. It's too hard to create those SKUs in the accounting system. Why don't we reconcile every year? This is your rebate. This is per the vehicle fee. So you can be creative about the way of how this money can be flowing back and forth, even like in the world where it's just difficult to manage those aspects in the vendor system, vendor management, procurement system. All this is hard, but there are ways, and these ways need to be explored. And someone can obviously generate billions of dollars in P&L within the OEM world. It's just something that we hope that the companies like us can help them, can guide them through the process, and can support them in designing this type of P&Ls from how they're going to be, from the mechanics perspective, how they're going to be implemented.
Kato-san or Dave, anybody want anything to add to that? Or
I'll toss in a quick comment based on what Evgeny said about another factor is not just the bureaucracy within corporations, which is Evgeny pointed out is significant. There's also the risk factor, and I've encountered this working back between tech and operational type companies. The automakers and transit properties and people that operate and build vehicles have one set of risks. They can deal with the fact that a vehicle is going to crash or an airplane is going to crash. It's not great when it does, obviously, but it's assumed as part of the risk. Likewise, the cyber world can deal with denial of service attacks, hacking, crashing, all the kind of things that cyber world, the digital world deals with. When they have to cross the lines or have had to cross the lines, they tend to get scared of dealing with the other kind of risk. And it scared a lot of automakers away from digitalization, and it scared a lot of tech companies away from doing a lot of the things that tech companies might want to do in smarter cities and things like that. I have a few colleagues on the call that are probably nodding because we went through this at the companies we used to work for. So that reciprocal risk, by them balancing the tech sector and by the automotive sector connecting and balancing their risk and their benefits, will make everybody comfortable with the digital physical world that's going to have to exist in cars. You can't totally virtualize cars. So it's going to have to have these 200-year-old industries. I work for IBM, which basically started the IT industry 100 years ago, and car industries made 100 years ago. So very old industries will learn to be a new industry together.
Right. Yeah, it's a there has been a lot of terminology and a lot of light, but there are a lot of heat and not a lot of light. I don't know around smart cities and in the last 4 or 5 years, and people like really smart people throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what happens, seeing what sticks. But I think that there's a lot of people who are very veering in and out of their lane a little bit in terms of how that might actually happen. So it's going to be figuring out where it resides correctly is a key piece of that. Great guys, great conversation. We do have some questions in now. Gani actually tipped off one there that we had in the chat queue. We had mentioned about the value of the LBS market at 152 billion. And the question from the audience on this is, and again, folks, use your Q&A function if you want to add more questions. We got a couple in the queue, but we have enough time going up at the top of the hour to maybe tackle one more. How critical is vehicle integration of LBS with real-time location systems to this type of growth in they asked in Asian and European and US markets? And are automotive OEMs ready for that? We talked about that a bit, but are OEMs ready for it? Maybe we go with Ev on that to start. How about you? Have something you want to, or?
Sure, of course. I mean, Trevor, I would suggest that probably Rei Kato-san is going to know a little more about the Asian market here, especially how location-based services are really evolving in Japan and other parts of East Asia in particular. We, however, at this point, we already work with partners in Europe. We work with partners in North America, obviously, where we're based, plus partners in India. So we're super excited to see that actually this is happening everywhere. Right? This type of growth is everywhere. And this is driven not only by the OEMs. I would rather say OEMs are reactive to this situation. It's more that, okay, the government is coming out in India, for example, and they say, we want to go totalless in 1 year. That's what the minister says. Of course, it's going to take longer, of course, but the political will is there to say, all right, every car is now going to go with GPS-based tolling. We're already doing this on the Delhi Expressway. Right? So they're showing this will, they're showing this progress, they're showing this action, because words don't matter if there is no action behind this.
Right.
And that is already what's happening around the world. And therefore, this is super critical for, again, going back to road usage charging, right? It's like you cannot have infrastructure everywhere. It needs to be in the field. In the field means the vehicle. If it is embedded inside the cars, that is way easier to enforce, way easier to audit from the government perspective, versus trying to pull out those aftermarket units everywhere across the board. And kind of how do you control all of that? Essentially, what you need to do then is you create a data protocol that needs to be standardized, it needs to be interoperable. And we see about 50, I think, toll tags, different types of toll tags across the United States, even if it's the same RFID technology today, right? So all of this just creates a ton of complexity in the market. And still until now, after 20 years since we started using RFID, we still have interoperability committee working on how we can make sure that you can drive from one state to the other and pay with the same toll tag. So this is all kind of difficult, which is why I believe it's all about integration inside the car. And OEMs are kind of really reactive to this, and hopefully they can catch up with this world as it is happening now.
Right. Rei, maybe you want to tackle that too from the Asian.
Yeah, one thing is like, while we are like promoting technology to the potential like customer, then we figure out kind of like each market demands a different like services, and also like we at the same time we found out like this like, Sheeva.AI can adapt to the like a lot of like services again with like only one kind of a platform, which is really great. Like for the OEM implement this like a system, their car, then they can enable to the services based on the market demand globally, which is really great for the like OEM size and easy to implement. And so that's why like we are really like possibility to growing like a market with like a Sheeva.AI.
Fantastic. Sorry, anybody else want to chime in with something on that, or no? I mean, it does. Sometimes I wonder. It does feel a little bit like you know, the early. I don't know who touched on it here. The early days of tolling, when it felt the late '90s, early 2000s, maybe in North America. Or at least where we built a lot of toll roads, and they seem to be built around the idea of securitizing the revenues. Therefore, you know, every hammer sees the nail as a solution. So it weren't really necessarily technological solutions, less financing ones maybe. So it'd be interesting to see how we roll this out. Another question here too from the audience. Can you explain more about the fuel tax being gone? Just today, there are articles about U.S. Department of Transportation not considering tolls or VMT to fund Biden's major infrastructure plans. I don't know. Hope we don't have breaking news on the infrastructure plan, but again, maybe Ev or somebody.
Let me jump on this one, since I kind of we got kind of and I kind of know what Tim's talking about here. I mean, I don't think U.S. DOT should have, there should be no federal VMT. I don't agree with that. I don't agree there. I don't think there should be a federal VMT. I'm opposed to it. I think states and cities and localities need to collect that revenue in the field and then not try to pull it back from Washington. The federal government has taxes on other things, but it's there are too many local differentiators for VMT to be applied at a national level, like the whole interstate system or something. So the states need to get that and get that money directly. And the federal government needs to support that and fund it through other kinds of taxes, whether, it may, so other kinds of energy taxes, like taxing the import of energy from other countries or something. So that's the biggest problem I've seen is that there really can't be a national taxes just don't work for fuel. They didn't work with the gas tax since 1994. They're not going to work with VMT. So let the states do it creatively in a way that serves their citizens and build what they need to build in their zone. No one size fits all. In terms of trucking traffic, which we haven't even talked about, because there's a lot of states that are big on trucking, like Montana and Wyoming. So no one size fits all. What USDOT needs to do is kind of some funding where it's needed, and then standardization, standards to make sure we don't get locked into proprietary closed technologies, which Sheeva emphatically is not, so that all of these systems can talk to each other and work together. So it's just about the role there and what should be done, I think. And that's what I think the secretary has been talking about. So.
And there's a real challenge. The IEA report last week that basically said gasoline's peaked, right? The gas demand is in the rearview mirror. I suspect that we might find out oil is the same way. And as you move to a more EV world, there's a regulated monopolies in most of those places that are in charge of how that fuel gets delivered in those locations. And that's a whole other host of transactions, and therefore taxation systems to leverage to get that to pay for existing models of doing that, but it aren't necessarily great for the margin of the retailer, right?
I would Trevor, can I add something here? I would also allude here to Tim's question. It's also about technical difficulty per se.
Right.
I mean, essentially, we need to fund those bridges and roads today.
Yeah.
VMT and tolls, it just takes time to implement, right? I mean, obviously there are some innovative technology providers out there like GeoToll, or like us looking into that space, or
Right.
GoToll. That's what Transurban was working on. But it's not overnight that you just turn on every car and it becomes a chargeable car for road usage fees.
Right.
It's unfortunately, it does take time. We're starting to see RFPs from the government, from the state governments, obviously, because that's where it's coming from.
Right.
Oregon, Utah, and Washington State being kind of on the forefront of this. Virginia is also now joining the room, right, of those states. So, and Florida, I imagine, is going to come next, and Texas, obviously, very, very advanced. So these things are starting to pop up, but again, implementing this thing tomorrow is not easy. Right. That's it.
Right. Well, indeed. And so we're down to 2 minutes here, guys. Maybe one quick last question here, and we'll use up the time we have. With autonomous cars, with connected cars and the talk of level 5 autonomy, consumer realization is moving from your car being an underutilized asset, which frankly is what Uber and DoorDash exploited. The consumer's time and attention is being the real overextended asset that's out there. Do you see what kind of any data points are on where you think VLBS will help drive that optimization going forward? Maybe David or Gani, somebody.
Well, I'll talk. Okay, I'll jump in. I mean, really quickly. I mean, they're going to be, what it's going to do is produce value. At the macro level, it's going to produce value-added services, and it will make part of the expense of having this deployment covered by the private sector. And that's the one thing that I tell state DOTs, unlike the previous assumption that the states pay for everything and then collect the revenue, the idea that there could be a public-private system without even really needing a public-private partnership, which is often a scary word, and they're not even allowed in about half the states. The idea of this public-private system that creates revenue for the fueling companies and the Starbucks or the whatever you want to do, and then the same system can use revenue for government. There's no reason, just like people pay their taxes with credit cards now, there's no reason to have these dual systems. And that in 33 years is the single biggest challenge that's now being solved by what we do and other companies are doing, is that the government is over here and the industry's over here, and they never meet. They have different parts of different companies that serve different needs. Now everything is together and connected without needing all these complicated partnerships. It's just that everything is now pulling in the same direction. And I think that fundamental change is what's going to drive what Sheeva is doing here. So.
Fantastic. And again, guys, we're at the top of the hour. Thanks, everyone on the roundtable here today. Evgeny, Gani, Rei, David, and thank everybody in the audience too for listening in and jumping in with some questions as well. Hope it's been a great discussion. Going to have a lot of very interesting months ahead in the world of VLBS, we think. A final note, a link to the recording of this webinar will be available to share within 48 hours. If you have any further questions, we have some contact info up on the screen there right now, so please don't hesitate to contact us. And that's all for now. We will be doing more of these webinar type events to help build the community's knowledge around VLBS. So stay tuned for more.
Okay.
We'll be reaching out again. Thanks again for joining us. And
Thank you, Trevor.
guys, great work, everyone. And we hope to see everybody back here soon. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.